Have you ever felt like you were being used? But not in a bad way. More like God had placed you in a moment where something bigger was happening, even if you didn't fully understand it. Sometimes in Scripture and in our lives, God sets the stage so perfectly that the enemy walks right into his own defeat. And here's the wild part. God often uses ordinary people to make this happen. You see, to the outside world, it may look like you're vulnerable, outnumbered, or even defeated. But heaven sees something else entirely. You see, the enemy thinks he has the upper hand, not realizing he just walked into a trap set by God. This is what's called the setup. Point 1. The enemy is not all-knowing. Let's be clear. The devil is not God's equal. He doesn't know everything. He's a master manipulator, yes, but he's still a created being who can be outmaneuvered by divine wisdom. Think about Pharaoh in the book of Exodus. He hardened his heart over and over, and God told Moses to go back again and again. And to Pharaoh, it looked like Israel was stuck, boxed in by the Red Sea. Perfect position for an ambush, right? Wrong. It was a setup. Exodus 14:4, God said to Moses, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army. Pharaoh rushed in thinking he was about to crush them, and God closed the waters behind him. But what if the moment that feels like it's pestering you is actually the moment God is baiting for your breakthrough? But what if you're not being left behind, you're being strategically positioned? There are times when God will let the pressure build. He'll let the enemy think he's winning. And right when it looks like you're about to fall apart, God turns the tables. Not to crush you, but to crush what's been chasing you. That annoyance, that generational pattern. God draws the enemy out, not to expose you, but to expose it. So don't despise the setup. Don't curse the cave. You might just be standing in the place where God's about to end that thing that's been trying to end you. Point 2. God uses the humble to bait the proud. Look at Esther, a young Jewish woman living in a palace, hiding her identity. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like a trophy. But God placed her there on purpose. At the right time, her position was used to expose Haman's evil, rescue her people, and flip the enemy's plan back onto his own head. Esther 7:10. So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. That wasn't a coincidence. That was strategy. That was a setup. Here's the takeaway. The enemy loves pride. It's his favorite weapon. It blinds, it deceives, it convinces people that they're untouchable. And sometimes God lets that pride play all the way out, not because God is late or uninterested, but because he's letting the enemy build his own downfall. It might look like darkness is winning, like evil is going unchecked, like people with power and bad intentions keep rising. But God is never out of position. He sees it all. and he's patient. Sometimes painfully patient. But while the enemy makes noise, God raises up people who move in quiet obedience. People like you, the ones who don't chase recognition, the ones who stay faithful when no one's watching, the ones who keep walking in truth while the lies on the other side keep growing. And here's the wild part. It's that kind of obedience, the quiet, steady kind, that ends up exposing everything the enemy thought he had hidden. So you don't have to shout to shine. Just stay faithful and let God do the uncovering. Let God do what God does. Point 3. You might be the setup. This is where it gets personal. What if your hardship, your delay, your unexpected move, what if it's not a setback, but a setup? Maybe the enemy thought he was isolating you. Maybe he thought pushing you out of that job or that opportunity was going to silence you. But instead, God was positioning you to expose lies, to break cycles, to rescue people who would have never heard the truth otherwise. You see, God doesn't just work around the enemy, he uses them. But what if there's more going on than you realize? In Genesis 50:20, Joseph looked his brothers right in the eyes. The same brothers who betrayed him, sold him, tried to erase him, and said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's not just a comeback. That's a revelation. What they tried to use to bury him, God used to position him. The pit wasn't punishment. It was part of the plan. And the enemy, for all of his scheming, walked right into God's setup. What if that's your story? What if the attack wasn't a random hit, but a baited trap? And what if you were the bait? Not because God wanted to see you suffer, but because God trusted you to stand still long enough for the enemy to expose himself. The very place you've been wounded could become the place God wins. So no, you're not just surviving the attack. You might be God's chosen setup, a living, breathing trap the enemy never saw coming. And when it's all said and done, what tried to break you will end up being the very proof God was in control the whole time. Final thought. If you feel surrounded, overlooked, misunderstood, don't panic. Sometimes the setup requires you to look vulnerable, to move in silence, to appear unqualified. But behind the scenes, heaven is orchestrating every step you take. You see, God knows exactly what he's doing. And the very thing the enemy thought would break you will break him instead. So take heart. You're not being overlooked. You're being positioned. You're not being played. You're part of the plan.